Hi, I'm Old Norse specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford. I'm often asked for my book recommendations for those who want to learn more about Vikings and Old Norse stuff. And so today I'm going to share some of those top recommendations, focusing on books in English that are designed for a general audience or for an undergraduate classroom, including a lot of the books that I use in my own classes. For a basic introduction to the Viking Age, I recommend The Age of the Vikings by Anders Vinrud. This came out just a couple of years ago, and it uses a very nice narrative structure to introduce not only the culture of the Vikings, but also a lot about the archaeology and the exploration, both west and east, that was pursued by the Norsemen during the Viking Age. Another book that's good along those lines is called, or was called, Daily Life of the Vikings by Kirsten Wolf. This book has also been republished under a different title that I think is something like Vikings' Daily Life During the Extraordinary Era of the Norsemen. You have to forgive publishers sometimes for jazzing up titles when Vikings are really popular like they are right now. For basic readings about Norse myth, a really good recent book is The Norse Myths by Carolyn Larrington. There is also a much older book that's harder to find and very expensive when you find it, called Myth and Religion of the North by E.O.G. Turville Peter. If you can find that, that's also a very good guide to all of the sources and the myths that we find therein. For primary sources, of course, the most important are the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda. For the Poetic Edda, my own translation is in contemporary readable English. Carolyn Larrington's translation is also in contemporary English in a somewhat different style and offers more footnotes, whereas mine, I think, this is not an unfair characterization, is more focused on readability of the content. Then there is the Prose Edda. I don't think there is any translation out there that competes with Anthony Falk's translation with Everyman Publishers. Another major primary source is Saxo Grammaticus Gesta Danorum, or History of the Danes. This has been translated by Peter Fisher and is pretty widely available. Other important primary sources for myth include Ynglinga Saga, which is in Heimskringla. There is a translation of Heimskringla by Anthony Fawkes and Alison Finlay that can be found on the website of the Viking Society for Northern Research. Speaking of which, Anthony Fawkes' translation of the Prose Edda can be found there too. If you're interested in the legendary sagas or mythical heroic sagas, what in Icelandic are called Fornaldarsögur, the sagas of ancient times, the most important is the saga of the Volsungs, which has recently appeared in a new translation by me. That translation also includes the saga of Ragnar Lothbrok, which was written as a sequel to the saga of the Volsungs. There are some other important mythical heroic sagas, including Gautrek Saga and the saga of Eroad, in a book called Seven Viking Romances, probably the worst title for any single book in this video because of what it seems to imply, but this is the old meaning of romance, right? Adventure, not shirtless Vikings carrying damsels up castle stairs. For the language, I recommend the new introduction to Old Norse by Anthony Fawkes and Michael Barnes. There is also the much older introduction to Old Norse by Evie Gordon. That is how I learned Old Norse back in the Stone Age. Of course, I approached Old Norse with a background in classics and other old Indo-European languages, and that's what that grammar is designed to do. It's designed for somebody who already, of course, knows something like Latin or Greek. For the sagas, Penguin, which is mostly a good publisher. I disagree with some of the people they've published, but their choices of who to publish, but Penguin is mostly pretty solid. Penguin has a collection called the Sagas of Icelanders that contains a lot of the most important sagas, including Laxdæla, Egils, Hravinkels, Gunnlaugs, many of the really important sagas. There's also an additional volume called Sagas of Warrior Poets that has some great additional ones like Bjarne Saga, Hittilakapa, and Cormac Saga. Then there is Njál Saga. I recommend the translation by Robert Cook, which appears in its own volume. As far as modern Icelandic, I think that Stefán Andersson's Icelandic Grammar, Text, and Glossary, which is from World War II, is an excellent reference. Although for the modern, today, 2017 language, you'll do better with Colloquial Icelandic by Daisy Neyman, which includes audio files. There's also a new dictionary of Icelandic English, English Icelandic, out from Hippocrene. So that is the first time I'm even aware of that an actual useful dictionary of English to Icelandic has been available in the United States without having to order it from Iceland. So that's nice. For Norwegian, there is a lot of different options. The Hippocrene Practical Dictionary is good for Norwegian too. And of course, keep in mind, this is only going to be bookmal. There's not going to be Nynorsk options typically in materials for learning Norwegian and English. Although there is a book called Norwegian Nynorsk by Peter Hollerocker. And then there is a long series of books by Margrethe Dambolt Simons that have come out in a lot of different titles. Teach Yourself Norwegian, Complete Norwegian. Now it's called something else. Those are pretty good, especially if you get the older versions that have more grammar in them, and they often come with audio CDs or audio files. And there are similar programs from the Colloquial series, the Teach Yourself series, the Complete series for Swedish and Danish. For Faroese, there's really not very much in English. There is a grammar by Lockwood that's very hard to get, but that is pretty indispensable if you do want to learn Faroese. Unfortunately, there's not much in English about Dalian, which a lot of people ask about these days. As far as some other just additional supplementary sources, I'd recommend the translation Ibn Fadlan and the Land of Darkness, which is an interesting look at the Vikings, or the Rus at least, through the eyes of an Arab envoy in 922. There is The Viking Age, a Reader, which is a collection of lots of different texts from the Viking Age, mostly sources about the Vikings by the people they were raiding, so it's very interesting to see that perspective, but it also includes translations, little excerpts from things like Sagas in Old Norse. Let me also make one remark about publishers. It's a good idea to check on who the publisher is of any unfamiliar book. You know, see if they also publish books that are well received about other subjects, or if this is just a fly-by-night publisher that's published, one or two books and is basically a vanity press. Vanity presses can usually be recognized by the fact that they've published like one or two books, but be wary of publishers that have words like university in their name. That's a big trick of these shadier publishers that aren't actually affiliated with the university, but there's nothing that makes it illegal to put university in the name of the publishing firm. So be very careful. Consider that most books are put out there to make money off of a fad, and right now Vikings are definitely a fad. So I hope this has been a somewhat useful overview of books. There's probably some that I've forgotten, but this goes over most of the books that I think are really indispensable in the library of someone who's beginning to study the Viking Age or Norse myth. From beautiful Colorado, I'm wishing you all the best.